The Indian Copyright Act was enacted in which year? 1957. Which government body administers copyright in India? That is Copyright Office under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. What is the typical term of copyright protection under Indian law for literary work? The life of the author plus 60 years. Under the Indian Copyright Act, which of the following is not protected? That is ideas and concepts. Which section of the Indian Copyright Act deals with the fair use or fair dealing? Section 52. Which of these rights is not included in the bundle of the Copyright Act? Patent rights. The Indian Copyright Act was amended in which year to include provision for digital rights? In 2012. What is copyleft? A type of copyright that allows free use and modification of a work under certain conditions. Copyleft licenses are most commonly associated with the open source software, which is an example of a popular copyright license, that is GNU, General Public License. Under Indian law, who is the first owner of copyright in a work created under employment? That is employer. The Indian Copyright Act protects computer programs under the literary works. Which of the following is not a feature of the Indian Copyright Act? Protection of ideas only. The term moral rights in Indian copyright law includes right of attribution and integrity. In copyleft licensing, any derivative work must be distributed under the same license. Which section of the Indian Copyright Act defines copyright? That is section 2D. Copyright registration in India is optional and serves as a prima facie evidence. Fair dealing under Indian Copyright Act applies for the private or personal use, criticism, review and reporting. Copyleft license promotes free and open sharing of knowledge and software. The Indian Copyright Act applies to both Indian and international work under reciprocal agreements. Who has the moral rights under the Indian Copyright Act? The author of the work. Which section of the Indian Copyright Act deals with the term of copyright protection for cinematographic films? That is section 28. Which of the following is not a feature of a copyright license? That is absolute restriction on commercial use. Which of these acts as a limitation or exception to copyright in India? Fair dealing for educational purpose. Who can file a copyright infringement suit in India? The copyright owner or exclusive licenses. Copyleft is primarily designed to allow software to remain free and open source. Under Indian law, how long does copyright protection last for anonymous work? That is 60 years from the publication. Which license type is not considered a copyleft license? That is Apache license. What is the main difference between copyright and the copyleft? That is copyright restricts use, where copyleft encourages sharing under the conditions. The Indian Copyright Act protects which of the following works? That is all the above: software, paintings and the music compositions. Which section of the Indian Copyright Act contains provisions related to infringement? That is section 51. What does registration of copyright provide to the copyright owner in India? Prima facie evidence in the court. Which of the following statements about copyleft is true? That is, it allows free use but requires the same license on the derivative works. Which of the following is a valid example of a copyleft license? That is GNU GPL. The Indian Copyright Act does not protect ideas. Copyleft is intended to encourage users to freely copy and modify software with the obligation to share alike. Which term describes the right of authors to prevent distortion or mutilation of their work? Moral rights. Which is not a common feature of Indian copyright law, that is protection of mere idea. Which of the following is true about computer software copyright in India? That is, it is protected as literary work. Copyleft license typically requires that source code must be made available when distributing derivative works. Which of the following is an example of a Creative Commons license that allows derivative works under the same terms, CC by SA, that is attribution, share alike? In Indian Copyright Act, cinematograph films includes movies, videos and the TV programs, which is not an essential element for copyright protection, that is novelty. The purpose of moral rights under the Indian Copyright Act is to protect the personal and reputational interest of authors. Which of the following is a popular software license that is not copyleft, that is MIT license? What does share alike mean in copyleft licensing? That is derivative work must be licensed under the same terms as the original. The Indian Copyright Act recognizes which of these types of rights, that is both economic and moral rights. Which of the following is not true about copyright infringement? That is, it always requires registration to prove.